Perfect. All right, Commissioner Paul, you may begin.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Salem Public Art Commission for September 11th, 2024. Let's go around real quick. My name is Zach Hull. I'm the chair of the Salem Public Art Commission.
Krista Lauer, Commissioner.
Spencer Emmerich, Commissioner.
Brian Hart, Commissioner.
Susan Apac, Commissioner.
Keith Bonogwin, Staff Liaison.
Jennifer Keller, Parks and Rec Division Manager, City Staff.
And I'm Kathleen Swarm, and I am with Parks and Recreation. I will be the new staff liaison.
Welcome. And let's take this opportunity to thank Keith very much for all of your help over the last couple of years. Very, very.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just Eddie, I had texted Eddie, he's not able to make it today.
Okay.
Do have a quorum, it looks like, if we need to vote on anything. So, okay. Is there any public comment today, Keith? You're aware of?
No, the two people that I were supposed to come at the last meeting, I also emailed them for this meeting, and it doesn't appear that they've shown up.
Okay. So let's go ahead and approve the consent agenda for today's meeting and the minutes for last month's meeting. I'll go ahead and move to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All opposed? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved. Moving into discussion items. So Chris is also not joining us today, just to stay out loud, and I've got some orders of new business, including the email from Chris. So just to say the new business tab is filling up a little bit. So discussion items on the agenda so far: accession of the library art collection.
Yes, I spoke with Mark, or chatted with Mark Weinstein from the city's legal department, and it's still in draft form, and then he's going to send it to Kathleen before next month's meeting, and then we can get that approved. And this is just to remind everyone to take into the city's art collection 44 pieces from the Library Foundation's art collection, which is already displayed and installed in the library.
Keith, we've already voted to approve pending legal.
Yep. So it's just pretty much paperwork, and I'm not sure who has to sign it, whether it's the chair or anyone, or the library foundation would probably need to sign that.
Review the draft strategic positioning document. That was drafted by Chris, who's not here today, but I think maybe it's worth taking a look at anyway. And then maybe we can continue this discussion over to next meeting when she's here to talk more about it. I read through it. Did other folks have a chance to read through it as well yet?
I think we went through it a bit at the last meeting. I think she kind of went through it somewhat. I haven't had a chance to really look at it in detail, but what would be nice is to see it sort of next to our plan, our strategic plan, and kind of marry the things that we've planned to do with what's in this document. Maybe we can do that at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. For my part, read it and thought, yeah, like I like how Chris laid out the, sort of vision language of this is how we imagine Salem being, and this is the kind of sort of areas of vision, I guess, which I thought I could see our strategic plan sitting in the background of Chris's thinking when she put that together. So I actually thought it was pretty good, pretty reflective of the work we've done so far. I agree, though, it'd be nice to, maybe the next step is to kind of marry the two together. Can you hold on just for one moment, please? Sorry, I'm in a meeting right now, okay? Yeah.
Almost mostly there.
Okay, thank you. My 5-year-old was tasked with cleaning her closet over some tablet time, and so she's eager to be released to watch it, which she has now been. Thank you. Um, yeah. So anyway, I think I didn't object to anything I read there. I don't know. Is that maybe what is the step there, Keith? Is that something that we would sort of approve as part of our sort of strategic planning universe of documents that's emerging here?
I think that marrying the two and making the direct connections between our strategic work plan and the visioning document would be useful. Today I spoke with the GIS department. One was Dan Brown, who is kind of like the GIS manager, and the other was Kenneth Deora, who is more of the technical person making the maps. And when I brought the idea of SPAC, the SPAC strategic vision of this, I felt like I was speaking more towards the manager in terms of the visioning of it. And then speaking with the technical person, it was more of what kind of work do we really need to do in terms of hiring an intern or, so putting those two together and communicating to different audiences is appropriate at this point in time. So I like that idea. So that'll be my recommendation, is kind of put another matrix together, but just side by side saying, hey, strategic objective A, B of a work plan matches with vision 2 of the document.
And
do we share this? I'm sorry, do we share it with anyone once we're signed, sealed, and delivered or whatever? Do we share it with someone else, or does it just go toward maybe our end of year report that we give to council and kind of share
So
that
commissions
with
can report to council through just a staff report, which is informational. They don't bring it up for discussion. And the chair, whoever is planning to do the end of year presentation to council in December or January, like we did this year, that could be a topic of discussion. But I think sharing it with Councilor Nishioka, who is a champion of SPAC, would be very useful, especially since it addresses her motion to find ways to make temporary art more accessible. So I think reporting back to council is a great idea.
So why don't we make it our goal to, at the latest, prior to a December presentation to council, but perhaps a month before that, if we can, have those linkages drawn. And just to say out loud, the work we've done so far are sort of work plan pieces that can marry up to the strategic vision. And there doesn't have to be a work item for every piece of the strategic vision all the time, right? So there may be things that we're not doing right now that would serve the strategic vision, and that's okay. Like that's the ongoing work of the commission to decide what capacity to have for the next cycle to add things to their kind of work plan. I'm just saying that out loud so we don't think we have to come up with a line item for every single thing in the visioning document. Right.
I don't know if we broke it down between short term and long term. We do that, or maybe that's something that we do because
I don't think
we know hiring a full-time staff person is probably long term.
Exactly.
But certain things we can get to right away.
I can volunteer to work with Chris a little bit to kind of marry the two documents together.
Just to clarify a question so that we kind of know moving forward, has the commission adopted those documents? Because similarly in the SPRAB, which is another board that we have, they have strategic plans, they have work plans, and those are adopted each year by the board. And so forth, and then yes, it's incorporated into the annual report. I'm just throwing out it's an actual formal process where action is taken by the board and those are adopted. So that then that information can also be shared publicly. So I just didn't know, I was just clarifying whether that had transpired or that was something perhaps still needing to happen by the
Well,
commission.
the strategic work plan was, I guess, voted on and approved by the commission, but we haven't disseminated it anywhere. And so that is more of a work plan for what we do. But the visioning document that we're talking about is more for external purposes. And we haven't vetted that with anyone yet. This is the second meeting that it's been brought up in terms of review. And what I'm hearing now is we wanna align it with the work plan and perhaps package it for formal adoption. What does the adoption process look like for SPRAD? Is it just a vote of the commission?
It's just a vote, it's just putting
Okay.
it on the agenda item. It obviously allows opportunity for the public to offer comment on it because it's a public document. And then it's really just the board, and in this case, the commission adopting that on behalf of the board or commission. So that's it.
I think that's the next step.
Yeah, maybe we can make as an agenda item that our goal is to adopt it or at least vote on it by the November meeting. So that we have, 2 cycles, I guess, to marry the documents, discuss, whatever.
It's also good for when we meet with the neighborhood association chairs, we have something that we can present to them in that form. Chair.
Okay, anything else on that topic from anyone? Subcommittee reports, the downtown and West Salem art pedestal project.
I think we just kind of informally, some people raised their hands, oh, I'd like to be on that committee, and actually I did too, that wasn't included in the minutes. And Zach, you might also want to, since you kind of have your finger on the pulse of a lot of artists around, that are doing work that might be suitable, maybe we need to kind of formalize that subcommittee and then figure out what we're gonna do, and also the RFP, is that what it is? RFP procedure, I think, needs to be clarified for us, and we need to know what you need from us in order to move that forward.
So, sorry, I keep interjecting, I'm just supposed to be sitting here watching today, so I apologize. So we're kind of inheriting that process. So I'm gonna kind of come up with a draft RFP proposal, but clearly, since we kind of weren't involved in some of those previous conversations and the specifics regarding the RFP, we'll be reaching out kind of in that draft RFP to solicit kind of input, because we want to obviously make sure we're encompassing all of the components that need to be there before we put it out. And then I don't know if as part of the process, you'll want to have certainly staff, but you'll want to have, and maybe you do, so I apologize if you do and I'm unaware, a committee to review those RFPs and a scoring and a matrix and all of that as part of the RFP process. And then reviewing those RFPs and then coming back to the commission with a recommendation as to, how you want to move forward in the selected vendors or whatever you want to call them. So there was a little bit of a process, and I think I remember from last meeting, I think we have a little bit of a time crunch in the senses, and tell me if I'm remembering incorrectly or if this is inaccurate, that the funds that were awarded have to be expended by June 30th of 2025. Is that accurate or not accurate?
That is my understanding from urban development, and it was Cherie Walgreen.
Okay, so we might want to work out, just because that process can take a little bit of time. Typically, when you put an RFP out, it's a minimum of 30 days, but it's not untypical for it to be 30 to 90 days, depending on what kind of response you get. And then by the time you review and adopt and obviously select and then install, and spend those funds, that time goes very quickly. So it's something, we may have to see either about carrying those funds over if that doesn't end up being a reasonable time frame, or just kind of really pushing that forward to try to meet that time frame.
So I get 3 questions. So can we clarify whether the funds have to be spent or allocated, or sort of committed?
So, go ahead. So there's really two processes in the budget. So you can carry funds over. You can establish a PO and designate those funds, encumber those. And you have until in May to identify, so it would be May of 2025, to identify what purchase orders and what encumbrances that you want to move forward. If you don't do that, depending on where those funds are located, some funds carry over from year to year and some do not. So like if it's a general fund or something like that, that doesn't carry out. It has to actually be expended. Process has to be completed. It doesn't have to be invoiced by then, but the project has to be completed and has to be expended by then. So I'm not familiar enough, quite honestly, with kind of where your funds are actually kind of located in what funding stream, and so I can look that up. But we can encumber the purchase order. We just have to identify that. So when they're when we're creating the 25-26 budget, those additional dollars are allocated for budget authority into the 25-26 year. So it's a process we can certainly do. We just have to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I just want to understand if they can be carried over or if they actually have to be expended.
Yeah, and I think part of that is also, and maybe it says, and again, I haven't read those documents, but you want to look at your grant documents to see if it specifically says they have to be expended within that time frame, and it doesn't allow the ability. The city may allow the ability to do it, but the grant award process itself, depending on the grant you receive, may not allow that process to happen. It may say they need to be spent and expenditured, and the expenditures need to transpire and proof of that by a certain time frame.
So I guess Keith,
It's not a grant. I thought it was a
No,
grant.
that's from urban development.
Well, I know, but I thought it was still like some kind of grant thing or something. It's not.
No, it's urban renewal funds.
Oh, okay.
And there's two budgeted, one for West Salem for, I believe, 30,000 and then 50,000
Right.
for the downtown. But like I said, we'd have to check with Sharia.
Yeah, so we can reach out to Urban if you want, and then kind of see some of the specifics with regard to that and get kind of some of that back information. And
that'd be great.
Yeah, but then we
You
can
also
carry it over. Then it sounds like, yeah.
You also mentioned, sending out the RFP. Presumably, you're going to want some input from SPAC about where that RFP is going.
Oh, 100%. That's part of the discussion and input we're going to need to get not only some of the specifics in the document itself, but if there's specific vendors or groups that you want it sent to, then yes.
Great.
100%, most definitely.
I think this is I'm gonna weave in a piece of new business here, which is a request from Chris Darcy to I'm gonna paraphrase her email and then she can speak for herself next session, but to essentially create a kind of project tracker that is listing out all the things that are on our radar, and then crosswalking that with dates, right? So I think this conversation is bringing up something that we would be useful for us. A useful tool is to list these items out that we typically show under discussion, and maybe we want to kind of have a project tracker review in these meetings where we pull up and I'm envisioning a fairly simple, matrix that just lists out, and Chris listed a whole bunch of things that we talk about all the time, the remodeling of the Peace Plaza, the things that are on our discussion thing right now could be on there, and sort of what are the timeframes, where does SPAC need to do something in order to keep the workflow moving, so that we can kind of use that as an easy reference document, both internally and as a thing to share externally with interested parties when we're when we're wanting to talk about what's SPAC doing. Like, here's what we're doing. We have 12 things on our project tracker, and they are all in some stage of exploration. Legal's reviewing different surfaces and trying to justify or coordinate an approach where we can put art on horizontal surfaces and flat surfaces, whatever the projects are. We could read, Chris later in new business, we can kind of read out what she was suggesting, but just to this point of there's some urgency around time frame, I think something like that might help us stay on track when there are time sensitive moments.
I wonder if there's some kind of software that links these action item tracker things directly to our work plan, because we do have these goals on the work plan to do things that are, linked directly to these things too. I mean, I don't know if you need software, but it just seems like it's, instead of having a lot of different documents and a lot of different trackers, that we kind of have something that, links it all together so that we know that we're moving toward our goal by doing these, these specific action items and things.
Yeah. Sure. I think probably, there's the high level visioning document, then there's like, we're gonna do all of these projects. And then when we move into the sort of managing the deliverables phase of that, like, here's a smaller Excel document probably that lists out all the projects we've said we're gonna consider. And then here's the stages there. Here's where it is, here's some notes, here's key deadlines we need to keep in mind and meet. I don't know. I have an inborn resistance to complicated IT projects.
Probably something exists. I feel like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Probably there's a,
Even in Excel and Google Sheets, there are project tracking templates, and you can very easily integrate that into a current document. So truthfully, I think we can integrate that very easily into the current project plan. We can even add a separate tab in that project plan that is more timeline focused. So I think that's something we can do very, very easily. We don't need to do anything.
And maybe that would be a way of looking at the discussion items, like when we got to discussion items, we could, because I think when I look through the list of discussion items, they kind of are this, right? They're kind of the projects we've engaged in.
Yeah.
And so if we looked at it that way, we could see easily, when are we trying to deal with the black discs exactly? Because that information gets kind of lost in the agenda. I'm sure it's written down in the minutes somewhere, but if we could track it that way, we could kind of see, we set a deadline of X to reach out to two other providers to get competing quotes, or whatever it is we said we were going to do.
I think there were columns in your matrix that were about, I mean, I didn't quite understand what they were when you first did them, but I think weren't they sort of doing about that,
And then also clear a budgetary part of it, but it scared you, so I just put
Yeah,
it in a regular Word document.
Right, so maybe we put some of that tracking back into it or connect it the way that Chris was talking about it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous because, I'm very impatient about let's stop talking, or we can keep talking, but let's do while we're talking. And let's actually see results. And I think we all feel that way. It comes a point where you just want to see things really happening. I think that's a great way to really see it in concrete form.
So, on that note, how quickly do we need to provide what kind of input to whom for the downtown West Salem art pedestal project?
The RFP, is that what you're referring to? So that's on my calendar to start working on that next week.
Okay.
And I set some time aside to kind of start that process. And so realistically, at that point in time, I'll be reaching out with regard to having some eyes on that, and then getting some additional information to make sure that it ends up in a position that draft that if you want to bring it back to the board at the next meeting to have them look at it and solicit input, that they have the ability to do that, and then kind of finalize it before we push it out and do all of that. So we can have some separate conversation if you want, Zach, with regard to what that looks like and how you want that managed, and what process you want to utilize, and we're fine with that. But yeah, it's on my calendar to start that next week.
Great. So balls in your court for a week.
Unfortunately, yes, it is.
Is
I
there
love
any way that we can get a hold of, and when the works were chosen, I think the last works that were chosen for percent, for art, 0.5%. With the pieces that are in this building, outside and inside. Is there any way that we can find out the other artists that were considered for those pieces? I mean, is there a record of the process that was done so that we don't have to completely reinvent the wheel? We can see those
Right.
artists, plus, I know that I've been kind of had my eye out in public art, people who do, artists who do public art and kind of making some notes of who I'd like to approach possibly, so.
So I'm sure that there is. We weren't directly, obviously, involved in that process because we weren't involved in the art aspect previously until just last month. So we weren't, but I can reach out to, I'm part of the building committee for this building, and I can certainly reach out to the players. Public Works was obviously the facilitator of going through that process, and so I can reach out to them and kind of talk to them about their process and who maybe they were soliciting from, and who maybe the responders were, who they sent that to, and whatever, and then we can share that information as well. Perhaps when we share the draft document, we can share, here's the list of potential interested parties, and then other folks can either add names or add, potential folks we want to solicit that to or not, but at least maybe as a starting point. And then we can maybe have that as part of that same discussion when we're looking at the document, if that works. But I'd have to do it. I'm sure the information is available. I just have to do a little research because, like I said, we weren't involved in that process.
Right, also the piece that's at the police, this plaza there, we were involved in that as well, so.
Yeah,
There were records that go back to who was approached and what artists.
I can check with engineering. That, the police facility was a few years back now, but engineering obviously led that project in and of itself, and they may have something in their records relative to that aspect of it. So I can reach out to them kind of in their historical files and see what they may or may not have.
And
Well,
I think Starsky might have been involved in that decision as well, so she might have her own list of artists that she knows.
yeah, while the ball's in your court, thank God, Jennifer, for a brief time here. Maybe I can ask all the commissioners if you have ideas about who you think an RFP should go to, organizations or individual artists. Maybe you could share those back with Kathleen now.
Please.
And I have some ideas. I know Chris Darcy is going to have ideas, and then we can try to build that list from our own ideas, and then marry that up with whatever historical research Jennifer's able to conjure up, and then we can kind of.
So I have the request for a proposal for this public works operation building. Would it be appropriate to send it to the commission? This is from Luke Gamalzo.
You can, or if you want to send it to Kathleen
Yeah,
and myself, and then
guys
certainly
can-
Kathleen, but I told her that I would try to help start that
Perfect.
process for
All
her.
right.
So if you want to
Yeah.
send it to us, and then we can kind of look at that and not reinvent the areas that, as you mentioned, that don't need to be reinvented, and then kind of start having dialogue about what needs to go in there that's not in there. But that would be a good starting place, would be helpful, since that's obviously what that solicitation was for. So that would be great. Thank you.
The other thing I think is, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any of the sites. I don't know if we have a listing of exactly where the 3 sites are, and I think it would be important for those of us who are deciding, I mean, even way before that, even soliciting, to see the site and see, what the visuals are like there, what the environment is like there, what the site's like there, before we invite artists for maybe a particular site.
absolutely.
Realistically, you're going to want to put attachments in your RFP that denote a map of where that looks. So because as part of their proposal, they're going to want to know that. They're going to want to know what's the dimensions, where it's located, what kind of the surface, all of those kinds of things. And so typically you'd want to be putting that as part of your RFP process, so that you're sharing that kind of in advance, so that they know that. Because realistically, if you don't, they're gonna ask that question, and you'll have to do an addendum, you'll have to just keep answering the questions and doing addendums to provide those answers to everybody that you send the RFP to. So the more of that kind of stuff that you can identify in advance and make part of your solicitation, the more that's helpful, so they kind of know whether that works for them or not.
We have three different sites. So, and we, you know, these artists could be considered for any of those sites, so it'll be a little bit more complicated maybe on your end to, you know, we'd have to explain, I don't know, we'll have to talk about it, but
Yeah.
explain that it could be for any of these three sites.
I think you just again need to specify the details of each site, and then as part of your proposal, I guess you'll need to determine on that they can apply for one site, up to 3 sites, you know, but you only need to apply for one, you don't have to apply for all 3, or whatever parameters that you want, so that, you know, when somebody proposes, if they wanted to provide a proposal for all 3 sites, that's fine. But if they didn't, they would be considered for whatever site specific that they wanted to do. So I think, you know, that would have to be identified in the RFP so that they had that understanding.
So just so I'm clear on sort of roles and responsibilities, so you guys right now are going to take this draft RFP, sit with it, review it, turn it into the vehicle for the new RFP that we're going to create. And then, because you keep saying you need to put it in your proposal, and I just want to clarify whether you mean we need to put it in it, or you are going to help us.
So ultimately, we're facilitating this on behalf of SPAC. So when I say you, it's SPAC's kind of responsibility to do that. So we're gonna create a draft proposal. We're gonna work with SPAC members to ensure that all the information that we think is appropriate for the RFP and the solicitation when it's sent out is there. But ultimately, it's, you know, on your behalf. So we're facilitating, so when I say we, it's we because it's collective we, and not necessarily you specifically, but clearly we need input and specifics from you folks.
Got it. So it sounds like.
And I imagine Jennifer will be reaching out
100%.
to you, Zach, and to other specific members to ask very specific questions that we'll need to create that RFP.
Great. So this is a collaborative process driven by you now to get an RFP, which we will review, and then we can fine tune the exact asks and the kind of stuff Susan's talking about.
We just wanted to make sure with your help that it's reflective of what you want in there to get you the result that you're trying to get.
Perfect.
It has to, because it's coming from the city, right? It has to fulfill certain things that you need to make sure that it has.
It does. It has certain components from a
framework.
legal aspect we need for it to processes and stuff that need to transpire. But the RFP itself is we're partners, I guess, with you from that sense, but ultimately you folks are the ultimate decision makers on, you know, if the legal components are met with regard to what level of detail and stuff is really going to be up to you folks that you want in there. Right.
Thank you very much for your help.
Welcome. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. That wasn't the intent,
No,
so I apologize.
That's, you know, we appreciate that, really.
All right, moving to the social media plan report, Commissioner Lauer.
Yeah, so things have been a little bit on hold right now just because we still are having access issues with our master inventory sheet and our inventory of images. So I have started those since the last meeting, going through and looking at our current database and seeing, kind of starting to make a list of which works have images, which works have decent quality images, which works would need to be rephotographed, and then also just in general, which works have any additional documentation. So kind of aside from the social media, but some of them have a just general inventory intake form. Truthfully, most of them do not. So I've kind of been starting to work on that list because, again, if we're able to find a lovely intern who can take this project on or something at some point. Oh, okay. Hi. One, say hi. Been brainstorming some ideas, but again, until I really am able to have that access back, it's been a little bit on hold in terms of putting together some posts, but hopefully soon we will get that back on track.
I think I missed a step in there somewhere. Is the access, what's the issue with the access?
So none of the links to any of the images are loading, and that has been the case for the last few weeks now.
I talked with IT, and what happened was they turned off a temporary server that was hosting those images. And have you tried those links recently? Because
Yeah, I tried again yesterday and today.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I will have to talk with them. They fixed it on our end, so we can access it. But I
Okay.
guess it's
Maybe if you republish the access rights or something to Kristen, maybe it will refresh, or I don't know, something.
okay. I can try that.
Sometimes software works.
I will address it. And I added to the agenda, Zach, if I may, Kenneth Deora, who is the GIS technician working on the database. He has access to all of the files, and he's putting into an actual database. And I said the SPAC was thinking about looking at acquiring an asset database and asset database for our collection. And he said, let me show them what I have so far, because it could be the solution that we're looking for.
Okay.
It's pretty exciting. He showed me just before this meeting. And so I'm gonna put him on the agenda. We'll put him on the agenda for October. That's October. And then you guys can make a decision on whether you want to use that as the primary.
Okay, yeah.
Sure.
We
That
can.
wouldn't cost anything because it's a city created thing.
It won't be like funds, like a contract, it will just be city staff using general fund funds for.
Okay. Is this a locator app that is identifying where the art pieces are in the city? Is that the intent of what you're?
It's a story now.
We use those all the time. We have locator maps in parks. We started the process actually with the city. We do everything from track kind of where homeless are to every park amenity to all of that to a tree canopy. So locator maps are kind of something that has been utilized a lot. So I was just trying to understand if that's what your intent was or not.
And then the other part I added to it, and that's why Dan Brown was there, is because the vision for SPAC was to make art to have art accessible to all of public, and it's all of public art. So we talked about what if the state wants to be part of this map, or universities and all that. So that's why the visioning part was really important for the conversation.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces. One is what is our inventory management system that allows us to store a image component. Right now it's all in a spreadsheet, I think, that Chris was trying to click through to get to images.
Well, that's kind of the issue too right now. It is in a spreadsheet, but then there's also additional information that are just in folders in a OneDrive. So there's no consistent singular place where all of the information lives in a nice accessible way.
And so that issue of like, what is the universe of the city art collection? Where is that data stored in an organized way so that one can go in and do all the kinds of things you would ever want to do with a database, right? Like search by artist, search by where is it located? It's in the mayor's office, it's in council chamber, it's in wherever, right? Here's an image, here's legal documentation, whatever. So that doesn't exist now. So that's one goal. let's get our arms around inventory management capabilities,
Great.
and then use that to feed a location map.
Mhm.
That data, which is a different, more public facing kind of thing where people are like, I want to go see, you know, where are all the works on display? And I'm like,
Yeah, so Dan Brown and them should be able to do that, because similarly, we do that with all of our amenities in parks. We have pictures of every asset and where it's identified in the park and so forth, and we can pull reports, so if we wanna know how many shelters there are, and where they're located, and then similarly, we have the ability to kind of filter, that information and then push that out for folks to see, so I think it's a different subject matter, but what you're wanting to do is very similar, if not the same as to what's currently being utilized by us in parks. So for whatever it's worth, hopefully that should be a beneficial conversation with Dan, because those are the folks we work with on all of our locator apps and all of that.
It'd be great if it could be migrated from what we have and then added to, because to reinvent, to redo, enter all that data.
So some stuff, we had some data similarly on spreadsheets and that kind of stuff, and some of it, they were able to migrate that and then put that in for us as a starting point. It depended on kind of where it was located originally and to do that, but a good chunk of it, they were able to do that, because similarly, that's a lot of assets for us, we didn't wanna have to have somebody manually kind of go out and do that, but yeah.
So what's the next step?
Well, I think just what Keith was talking about, having Dan come here and speak about that, I think would be very
let's push it to our next.
helpful. Yeah.
Okay. Krista, did we kind of interrupt you? Did you have more to say?
You didn't. Truthfully, it was part of this larger conversation about inventory management. So, no, so I will still try and get, a couple posts up here and there. But being able to do my kind of full month-long plan, just not knowing what I have access to, has just kind of been put on the back burner, but I'll still try to get a few things up here and there.
Okay. So Keith, you're gonna see if we can use the existing system in the meantime.
Yes, an IT person sent me an email. It looks like I have to do some coding to replace the first part of the URL with a different one. And that could be just a simple code.
Yeah. Try and call.
If we can do that so that we can keep moving forward with the social media stuff while we hear from, I think Dan's, he said his name was the database and JS guy next meeting.
Dan Brown, yeah.
Okay, great. We've got a couple of.
It is. It does work. Okay, so I'll recode it and send it to you, Krista.
Okay, great.
Maybe problem solved. We've got 3 maintenance issues going on. Black disk first.
Yeah, I kicked that to Jen and Kathleen again.
Okay.
Because I'm done with it.
Yeah, I think where we were, if I recall, is we have a bid from Lee Immonen. We don't have other bids, or we didn't, at least in the last 2 meetings ago. I think I was absent last month. But we need some number 3 to try and go.
So there's two contractors of record that we have currently, up to 150,000 each. And then Lee's estimate came in over 5,000, which requires, according to purchasing rules, to get 2 more quotes. So the easiest would be to go with our current contractors of record.
Okay.
So that's the next step.
Yeah, if you go with your COR, you don't need to get the additional proposals.
But they like, because he did the Rooster and
If
And
he's
he's
not
not
a
a
COR, well, then you're screwed. You need to do that.
yeah.
I have a memory that we did this for this piece, and that this is actually what maybe kicked off Finding Lee, was that the 2 CORs for this artwork came back with very, very high prices. But maybe I'm.
They are high. They're the ones that did the Pioneer family. That got retagged.
So can I ask, is there a specific reason that you want that particular individual? There's another process that's called sole source justification to which then basically lets you deviate from going out and either utilizing the COR or getting 3 bids. But usually there has to be the justification as to why somebody you want in particular that somebody else couldn't do that. So my reason is, you know, had he been involved before, perhaps making
Yeah.
reviews, he's familiar with it, has he been, you know, kinds of things, because those are the kinds of components that we can put in a sole source, and then that allows that you don't have to get the three bids. It's just basically then approved by purchasing. So the city could submit that on your behalf, and we can work with you on what those justifications are. Get that approval submitted, and then purchasing cuts kind of the purchase order for that particular vendor. So that's another option if there's some specific reasons.
No, I mean, so Lee, there were very specific reasons for involving Lee in the restoration of another piece that's now complete. He was the student of the sculptor who originally made the piece, et cetera, et cetera. He then, because his bid on that piece was lower than the contractors of record, we also asked him to look at the black discs.
Mm-hmm.
And he also returned a bid that was seemed cost effective relative to the kind of pricing we'd seen from the contractors of record. So that's the end of the story. So I guess from there, if you have a path that doesn't require you, because I feel like I can predict with a high degree of accuracy what's going to happen, which is the contractors of record are going to come back with a $40,000 site plan to review the piece and decide what it needs. And right out of the gate, you're going to blow like, so yes, there's good reason not to go with them. If that can be made into a 3-step path instead of a 20-step path, great. But that's, you tell us what we need to do there. Like,
so I don't know who the appropriate person is to have, but we probably need to have some offline conversations, some, you know, one-on-one conversation, and kind of talk through those specifics. Cost itself is, in and of itself, is not a justifiable reason, right? Because you can get 3 quotes and you just don't go with the other ones, if you know, kind of thing. But if there's specific things with regard to as pricing aside that would be beneficial, but I don't want to take a long time. I'm just saying that there's an opportunity there that we might want to explore with having some further discussion that we might be able to capture in a sole source and get you where you want to be, depending on the outcome of that conversation. So whoever you think is the appropriate person to have that conversation about those details.
I'm also realizing, just as a aside, that I think I missed last meeting, which was when perhaps you guys got introduced. So I think the structure has changed. So I'm catching up a little bit too on like, and maybe Keith, you can kind of give me the 2-sentence overview. Like, we've shifted away from public works into a different, is that the structural change that's happened here? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is great. I'm just catching up on.
There's,
You're now part of the community services, parks and recreation family.
Which is
community service.
fun.
Did we not get other bids for the rooster? I thought we did, and that's what we were just going to the same people that we had gotten.
No, we did a sole source because
Oh.
of Lee's connection and
Okay,
skill set
then my memory
working with that. The
Okay,
black discs, we got a general, the estimates are not apples to apples. So Lee's 5,000 estimate was specifically for the repair and restoration of the black discs. The 2 original quotes from the contractor's worker were an evaluation of it,
right.
which
Yeah.
was higher than the $5,000
Right.
just to fix it.
Which is what so I feel like we already did this. Like we.
Yes, but the next step to compare apples to apples would be take Lee's description or scope of work to repair it and say, hey, this is what we're looking for specifically, not an evaluation, but a repair and restoration.
Mhm.
Tell us how much it is.
Okay,
Once you get those 3, then we can make a selection.
okay.
Right.
And because Lee really doesn't have any specific, I don't think, from what I am limited understanding, like to this piece as he did to the Hess's piece.
Right, although he isn't a sculptor himself, and
But
there's something very particular when you're restoring a surface of an artwork like that that not just anybody can do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of consideration, so it might be, you know, I don't know the contractors of record, whether they are art restorers or.
Well, they did the one on Bush, Park. the
They
past
cleaned
year.
it, right?
Oh, did they clean it?
But to actually put on a new surface, if that's what's required, I don't know, I mean, if they are art, I don't know who they are, but it would be important to get somebody who is a real bona fide artist.
Well, and that potentially can be part of the justification is that, you know, it's a specific, you know, surface or whatever, there's a very particular process that needs to transpire and they need expertise in this area, this area. And perhaps the COR, I'm not familiar with your CORs and how that solicitation for those CORs was, how general it was and how specific with regard to the skill sets. But in looking at that, you know, because sometimes CORs you're at, it's very general and broad-based, and sometimes it's very specific when you're doing that. And I don't know the specifics of those two CORs, but we want to look at that to kind of see, you know, is there specific mediums and it's limiting, so they're a COR, but they're doing this specific type of work and activity, and this is outside of that, so maybe a COR isn't applicable. So those are all kinds of things that I guess we would want to talk about.
Yeah.
That would be useful for us to be educated about. I don't, to my knowledge, the CORs were chosen outside of any SPAC process. Like, I don't think they're art specific, to my knowledge. Like, I don't.
Oh, they are, they're.
Like, how did the CORs get chosen? Like, where did they come from?
An annual reapplication process.
So yes, you can do annual renewals, but typically when you start a COR process is you're going out for a solicitation, right? You're doing either an ITB, invitation to bid, depending on your type of COR, or you're doing like an RFP or an RFQ, something along those lines, or an RFI. And so you're soliciting for very specific types of responses. So again, sometimes it's general, sometimes it's very specific on what you want your CR to do. So they're only doing this level of work or they're doing this level of work. And so we would need to look at what that initial RFP said, and then the contract that they got, the COR, to kind of see how limiting that scope is, and if it's just for specific kinds of stuff, or just kind of like, well, you can work on art, kind of thing. So we need to look at those documents, and if you don't have those, Keith, if you tell me who those folks are that are your CORs, I can get those from purchasing, go back and get that information from them, so we have that available. And then that can help us towards
Because in this
our justification if we wanted to go through for sole source. But I don't know the specifics of what was solicited, because obviously we weren't involved at that point.
It's the CORs are for specifically for public art conservation, maintenance, and restoration services.
when were those? Do you have visibility on when those were entered into? Is that
2022.
Okay. Right.
They have 5 years of annual renewals.
So it depends. Sometimes it's just you up it each year. Sometimes you up it each year, but up to like 3 years or 5 years or something. Legal usually doesn't like to go past 5 years because circumstances can change and all those kinds of things. So it depends on how your contract was written. It can be anywhere from 1 to 5 with annual renewals without having to go through the process. And once you come to the end of that, then you have to go back out for that solicitation process.
What does it mean to be a contractor?
It means you don't have to solicit bids. You can just call them and say, we'd like you to do the work, irrespective of the cost of it. If you have the budget to pay for it, it's simply you call them up, say, here's the work we want you to do, here's when we, want it done, and it doesn't matter in the purchasing thresholds. Purchasing thresholds indicate certain levels of things that have to happen, whether it's formal or informal bids and the number and all of that, depending on the amounts. If you have a COR, you do not have to utilize those. You don't have to do that process because that's already been kind of vetted through that process.
You're right. I mean, that's what it boils down to. Something like that.
So just call them and tell them you want the work done.
Is there any reason why we couldn't ask Lee Eminent to become a COR? Because we've already used him and we might use him in I mean, if you want to, I don't know what it entails.
You can't do that unless you go back out for the COR process. Once you have your CORs, you either need to let those expires and not renew them at the end of their time, their annual renewal, and go back out for a solicitation and select a new COR. You can have a primary or secondary or two, but once you have those in place, you can't just add somebody without going through the process. So no.
So to drag this back to these particular pieces, so in my memory, we did send out a request to repair them to the two CORs and to Lee. And Lee came back with a $5,000 quote, and the other people came back with a site evaluate. Like, we can't even give you a quote until you pay us a large amount of money to come out and look at it. So do we in fact need to take another step? I don't, maybe you can tell us what we need to do. I guess the question is, how do we push it forward?
Okay, so if you provide us, Kathleen and I, those documents, Keith, if you have those or whatever. So as long as you're going out to 3 folks, if they're, then they can be considered non-responsive, right? If you're soliciting for a certain type of work and you've asked them to do a quote on that for an estimate and they're not providing a response for the work that you've added, that can be considered non-responsive, right? You can't reach back out to them to say, hey, this isn't what we asked you. This is what we want you to do. But it could be non-responsive. And so given that, if you've already got those responses, we can look at those and maybe you're good to go.
That'd be great. If you wouldn't mind taking a look at them and seeing if I just want to make sure we're not stuck in a.
So we can see how we can utilize that based on what they say and how they responded to see if we can just consider them non-responsive.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks. Sorry if that went on longer than we
No,
thought.
I'm sorry. I
We're
feel like we're
learning-
getting you guys
we're
way off track from your agenda.
Yeah,
So.
we're learning the way that, that you're learning about us, we're learning about all sorts of things that we didn't know about too, so this is great.
Chemeketa Parkade graffiti.
Yeah, so I reached out, I emailed Blaine Fontana and I haven't heard a response back. City forces can't or won't touch it because they're afraid of ruining it. But I think his name is Zimmerman, Mike from facilities, is my contact. He could probably add a coating on it later on, and if it's part of urban development, if we want to pay for it, because urban development does not have funds for the maintenance of the art, just installation.
Okay,
So
but first we need the artist to repair
the
it.
artist to fix it up, and then at that point in time, I would ask them, give us a quote for how much it would cost for you to do it. Alternatively, we could have staff put it on a plan to maintain it, but that would have to be budgeted.
Can we, would you be able to ping him again and just see if he?
Yeah, let's see when he sent it.
Great.
Do you have a picture of that? Because I think I was looking for it on the.
It's mild.
It is kind of up in the corner, it's not on the main part of the image, if I'm not mistaken.
There's 2 parts to it. So. I can share screen.
Yeah,
So here's the mural, beautiful.
Yeah.
Down here and up here.
oh, I didn't see the down there part.
I
Oh,
think
wow,
that's like oranges and bananas or something. And then on the top.
Okay.
And on the top is
Yeah.
some graffiti by the elevator.
Yeah, I noticed that one, I didn't notice the other one, it seems pretty,
It's light.
okay, got it, yeah.
Well, thanks. If you wouldn't mind reaching out and seeing if we can get in contact with.
Is that also an area where the paint has worn off, kind of a little bit, the kind of pinkish
Yeah.
paint?
Let's see.
Yeah, that, it looks like the paint's chipped off a little on the lighter music green.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like over here too.
Yeah,
That's what I
that's
meant, yeah.
But what Eduardo was saying is that even the graffiti artists with their murals, they put anti-graffiti coating on it
Yeah.
now, and perhaps SPAC should add that to their requirements for murals. For
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We do that on everything.
Yeah,
Um,
and what do we do if he can't do it?
well, let's follow.
I sent them on the 3rd.
Okay.
Mike Zimmerman is city staffer who said, let us know if you'd like us to do the work and he could probably quote us on it.
What? Why don't we go ahead and get a quote from him on what that would cost for the city to do it? If let's give Blake another week or something to restore, if we haven't heard from him by the next meeting, if we could also have a quote of what it would cost for the city to take care of it.
So are they willing to actually repaint it?
Artists usually do, is my understanding.
Well, I don't know whether he would come back and do it or not. It'd be up to him how he feels.
And did Mike say he would be comfortable repairing the paint?
No, not the
Yeah,
paint.
Not the
Just
paint?
putting the
Just a coat.
anti-graffiti
Yeah.
sealant on it.
Yeah, I mean, you would need somebody with a lot of skill, at least to do the clean part. The other part, I'm not sure. That just looks like it, I'm not sure what was there.
Is Blaine Fontana, is he the artist?
He's the
Is that-
mural
He's the
painter,
artist.
muralist, yeah.
He also did the one for the cherry, what is it called?
Maraschino
Maraschino
cherries
cherries,
out
yeah.
near the fairgrounds. There's a
Yeah.
huge. He does a lot of murals around.
And so I think to loop it back, the question was if Blaine can't repair the paint,
Who's gonna?
who would actually repair the paint? Would it be going out to bid sort of situation? Do we know that?
You could seek
Costs?
that if they knew like other artists that they think might have the capabilities and ability to do that, you can get quotes for them, or you can also look at your CORs, or you can look at sole source specific that, they don't meet that criteria. So there's a few different
Okay,
options depending on what
Good
needs
question.
to
We have a
transpire.
commissioner who paints murals. And he would probably, he's not here today, but he would probably be able to give us some.
great.
As a matter of fact, I have a update from him, Zach, on the Jefferson Street mural.
Oh, great. That's the next agenda item.
Yeah, he said it needs one more session. And he's just figuring out the date that works for the owner and the artist. So it looks like
Perfect.
it's near
Just in process.
completion.
Great. Wonderful.
And then are you gonna need a taste?
Yes.
He does that with all of his murals.
Thanks, Susan, for that. I've got 2 new business items. Keith, yesterday I sent you, or 2 days ago, I sent you a note, so I'm just gonna summarize this for everybody. I was contacted by a neighbor who's a professor at Willamette, who's a physicist actually, but every year he teaches a course on the cultural history of knitting. I'm paraphrasing that, but it's something like that. And his students do what they call a yarn bomb. They, do something every year. And that has always been on campus. But this year they want to engage with the city. And what they want to do is to knit scarves and hats and install them somewhere in a public space with the intent that they be taken by people who need them or want them. And so that he reached out to me because we're neighbors and said, hey, is this something, how do I engage with the city to do this? It would be, obviously it wouldn't be an installation that was up very long. I don't know how many students he has, so I don't know how many, I don't think there's a tremendous number of these things. And of course they're designed to be taken by people. So it's probably a fairly temporal installation, but it is maybe adjacent to our conversations about temporary art installations. Where could this go? Keith, I saw that you CC'd that request through to Jennifer and Scott Archer. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that we should do here to kind of, they adjourn for the semester in November. So what he would kind of like is if this is the right venue, he would for educational reasons, he would like to invite his students to present to us, to SPAC, at our October meeting, if we are the appropriate place to have this conversation. And if not, he'd like to be directed to who he should speak to.
That's me.
Thoughts?
So if you're looking at putting it in a parks location, then yes, the conversation would be through us, with regard to kind of talking that through on the specifics of that project and, you know, some potential park locations that maybe seem conducive for that. So that can just be kind of a side conversation in the time that he wants to do that. I know you're saying in November, but kind of like, you know, does he want it up before they adjourn, or does he you know, he just wants to kind of everything, the specifics put in place kind of thing. So we can schedule a meeting maybe with him and then whomever from SPAC, whether that's you, Zach, or someone else, and both Kathleen and myself, and we can kind of have that conversation to get those specific details. If he's looking at doing it in a park location, if he's looking at doing it in some other location downtown, you know, for example, kind of thing, then that wouldn't necessarily be us. He probably would have to reach out to urban development and talk to them about some downtown locations. So it's really kind of just dependent on what his vision is, I guess, with regard to that.
Yeah, I think he's looking for guidance and a fast time frame because his time frame's a little short. I mentioned, you know, I was trying to imagine where one would hang stuff like that. And I think there's a fence around the Eco Earth Ball, which I know is attractive for other stakeholders trying to drive fundraising efforts, and maybe that would be a synergy that was interesting. And he was like, "Great, that sounds great." I would, you know, so he's thinking Riverfront Park or wherever, you know. So I think a park location, he'd be happy with that. So I guess, should I respond to him again? Do you want to respond to him since you're on that last email that he sent?
We can, Kathleen or myself, we can reach out to him and say, you know, we were kind of looped in to this conversation and, you know, we want to see how we can be helpful to maybe facilitate that vision coming through and to talk about the specifics of that with him. We can reach out with some possible, you know, date and times options, and then you as well, if you want to be included in that conversation. Or directly. We can do that. We can kind of pick up that mantle and reach out to them and say, you know, it was brought to our attention, and see what we can do to kind of help with that.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be part of that. He's a very nice guy. So he's just like, we want to do this cool thing with our students and the city. And
I think, to be honest, part of the conversation is who is he wanting to be the recipient of those items? Because if he's just wanting kind of just regular folks from the general public to do that, or if he's thinking, quite honestly, Riverfront, Mary, and all of those specifically, we have some large populations of unsheltered, and he thinks it would be benefit for them as we're coming into the fall and winter to derive the benefits of that. So I think that's part of what, and maybe he doesn't care, maybe he doesn't know, but I think that's part of that conversation, so that we can kind of help direct him on where that makes the most sense, so that he's reaching the audience he wants to reach, I guess.
Great, thank you for taking.
It's interesting that he's doing it. You know, usually yarn bombing is kind of a kamikaze thing. You don't get permission to do it anywhere. There's a history of it. People doing it on light posts and park benches and things, and it's like, oh, it just happened overnight. But this is an interesting way of working with the city, and I love the idea of the scarves and the hats, and especially for the unhoused population.
Well, it's new to me. I've not heard of it before, so when I saw the email, I was like,
if you haven't been in the city,
Kathleen may be familiar with it. She has, you know, some other experience, but I wasn't
that's why
familiar
they
with
call
that
it
particularly.
yarn bombing. You know, it's like,
It was all brand new vocabulary to me. I was like, cultural history of knitting, yarn bomb. I was like writing them down in my new vocab book. I was like,
it just reminded me, like, when you TP somebody's house or something. I'm like, is it just, we're just doing it, so that kind of thing. So
you know,
yeah, I mean, it's more productive. I get it, but I'm just saying, anyway.
sometimes it's a political act, and sometimes it's just to make something look cool.
And then I want to circle back to the, I guess, in the context of the presentation to council. So my term ends in December, and I'm going to roll off because I have some other volunteer opportunities that I need to address. So we have a few meetings to kind of figure out another chair and whether or not you want me to present, the group wants me to present to council in December, kind of at the end of my term is here, or if the next chair wants to present in January, that would be an opportunity to introduce themselves to council and be the sort of voice of spec. So putting that out there. I don't know if that requires an action item today, but to let folks start thinking about that. And then we also have the introduction of the SPAC liaison, which I guess has sort of happened, but maybe do you want to tell us more? Should we have a?
So, yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked about that, although you think it was me as much as I've talked versus Kathleen, but Kathleen Swarm, so she has been with us on the recreation side of Parks and Recreation. Kathleen has both experience here and then in her previous capacity before coming to the city with bringing art, both temporary art and stuff to parks and other locations. And so we're grateful for the experience that she's had with regard to that. And we think that, you know, as SPAC has come under Parks and Recreation, she's a good fit to kind of help facilitate that forward. We certainly know Councilor Nishioka, as well as others, are looking at trying to encourage temporary art in the parks and kind of working towards that. So it makes sense with you folks from that regard, being part of Parks and Recs and how we might be able to do that. And we think Kathleen obviously works extensively with parks because of all of the events and facility use that she deals with. So this is just kind of another added layer and component. And so, yeah, this is Kathleen's first meeting, kind of getting a sense of it. And Kathleen can talk a little bit more about herself if she wants to, but this is just really an opportunity to put a face with a name for us, and then to kind of start those dialogues moving forward. So.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I do not underestimate what's ahead of me. And I'm really glad to have Jennifer and the rest of the team to support me, as well as I will be leaning on you guys. I'll be asking lots of questions as we move forward, and we'll all get familiar with each other. My experience and background is in event production. I've worked in event production for a decade. Before coming to the city, right before COVID, I was deep in events as an executive for a large production company. What we were really known for was touring the nation, bringing large stage productions. So that would be, a lot of people are familiar with like music festivals and seeing a big stage with lots of lights and pyrotechnics and that sort of thing. So we would travel around and we would bring that to different music festivals. And when it wasn't the touring season, we also owned event venues back in Phoenix, Arizona. And so we owned different sizes of venues, but what made us interesting and unique is that we proudly would share that our background started as an artist collective. And so it started as a collective of artists really based out of Phoenix that all came together and would bring their different talents together to create events and experiences. So that could be anything from sculpture to fabrication, light design, and that worked its way into this very large production company. But it always remained a large part of what we did. So our largest event venue that could hold 4,000 people always had an art gallery in it with a rotation of local artists that would always come through. So if somebody came to see their favorite artist playing at our music venue, they would also get to walk through our art gallery that was there. One of our venues was a standard art gallery, which displayed primarily 2D and 3D art. And then that also gave way to the nonprofit side of the business that I work for, which was a nonprofit dedicated to empowering people through art. We figured we had all of these fantastic creators amongst us and all of the tools to do fabrication, 3D printing, all of that. So we wanted to give back to the community, so we formed a nonprofit. And so that was my life for 7 years. I worked for that company before COVID happened, all events stopped, and I wanted to come home to Oregon. So I came back to Oregon and found my way here to the city of Salem, and now I get to do events here. So I'm hoping some of that background and my personal passion for art will be a great link. And then I have Jennifer to help me through all of the bureaucracy that we will need to go through together with all the contractors' records and all of that. And I've also got myself the full edition of Robert's Rules so I can properly guide you guys through these meetings. And I'll be highlighting and tabbing all of those pages.
Wonderful.
Yeah, great.
Thank you so much. We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
Very
At
exciting.
some point, I will have to share a lot of when we would go out on the road. Part of the package that we would put together for these art festivals was art installations or interactive art elements, a lot of performance art. So we would package that all together and bring them to the different festivals. So at some point, I'll share some photos with everyone of some of the fun stuff I've got to be
Love to
involved
see
in
that,
in the
yeah.
past.
And hopefully we can do some more of that here in Salem.
Yes, I
That's
would love to
exactly
see it.
what we were talking about.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have other new business or action items or comments today?
Only, we're gonna miss you.
Oh, okay, man.
And thank you, and, just a big thank you again
You're
for
welcome.
everything that you've done for us.
Thank you all. I've learned so much over the past few years, and it was a large part of why I enjoyed coming to work at, in public works, you don't really get to work with art, so
Yeah,
this was a bonus for me.
no, don't be a stranger.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
You did a great job, Keith.
yeah. Thanks, Keith.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
I'll make sure to bring them back from time to time.
Yeah.
We'll find a reason why people come visit.
I'm at the Saturday market selling my mushroom art.
Good to know.
Can I ask just a logistical question? So as of today, Keith, are we no longer to email you about any SPAC related questions?
Well, I got a list of follow-ups. One of the top ones on my list is to get that list to you so you can actually function as the social coordinator. So what I'm gonna do is find someone who can do some coding to cut part of the line, the path, replace it with the new path, and then I'll send you that link.
Perfect.
But yeah,
We'll start to now
yeah.
reach out to our new people.
Yes.
We'd be emailing.
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. So
Okay. Definitely.
any new kind of business,
Yes.
why don't you guys just reach out to me? My email is K for Kathleen and Swarm, my last name is Swarm, like a swarm of bees, at cityofsalem.net. And so you can just forward things my way. And any conversations that you need to wrap up with Keith, if you just want to copy me on those as well, just so I start getting reference of some of these things that are going on.
The other thing we can do is we can get a commissioner's list and contact information from you and so forth, and then we can send something out to you folks with giving you Kathleen's myriad of contact information in mind as well, just in case you should happen to need it.
That'd be helpful.
But we'll get all that information from
that'd be
Keith so
great.
that we have all of that moving forward.
Okay, well, welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And if there's no more comment, then I think we'll go ahead and adjourn today's meeting.
Have a great day, everyone.
Later. Take care. Happy
Bye-bye.
fall.
Bye.
And
It
today
is kind of a
was
little
like
bit of a
fall.
polished day by comparison